In this video, we'll be talking about using a yoga block. And I'll be incorporating a yoga block into some asanas, some shapes, so you can see how I would use them in a class in a flow. But this will be a little bit more workshop style. So we'll kind of break down the poses and examine how we might incorporate a block. Now, there are lots of different kinds of yoga blocks. Lots of different people who make them, lots of different shapes and sizes. I have a few here, I'll share some examples. My very favorite is a cork block, and this is the kind that I'll be using today. This one is about 4 inches by 6 inches by 9 inches. So there's 3 settings, the low, the medium, and the tall setting when we're using them. And we'll use those different settings for different purposes. Similarly, there are also foam blocks. So these are gonna be a little bit softer. They're not quite as stable for things like balancing, but they provide some good feedback if you're standing on them, say in a tree pose, to kind of move a little bit more. They're also softer if you're resting things like elbows or foreheads on them than a hard cork block. This one is a little bit shorter, so it's more of the 3-inch height, where this black one is the same size as the cork block I just showed you, just made out of foam. They're quite light, so easy to throw around, easy to carry around if you were to carry your own props. And there's also some like these that are even smaller that folks will call bricks, very thin, that people will use to place under their heels or their toes in certain shapes to create a slight elevation. If you don't have access to blocks in your studio or in your home practice, you can absolutely use household items. And my favorites are a thick book or a stack of books. This is a little kid's library in one little book. Nice and stable and sturdy. You can see pretty much the same size as those yoga blocks. This surface is a little bit slippery, so I would just be careful that you're not standing on this or sliding off of this. A hydro flask, water bottle, or something thick and heavy. Great for things like half moon, when you just want a little extra reach to balance. Not great for standing on or resting your head on. So serves some of the purpose of a block, isn't gonna meet all of the rest. And then maybe something like a step stool or a chair, or you can see that little ottoman behind me. Something that you might have in your house, even a little crate, that can do the same thing. Bring the ground up. Create a surface that you can feel steady on to sit, to stand, depending on what object it is. A lot of people are afraid or shy away from using props because they think that they're a crutch, or they think that it's a bad thing to need them. Many times when I'm teaching classes and I tell my students, go grab some props, I'll have people that say, oh, I don't need a prop, I don't need a block. I'm like, I know you don't need it. I want to show you how you can use it to enhance your practice, to feel something different, to go further, to improve your alignment, to provide support. So there are so many different ways that you can use it that can let you feel more, feel better connected to your body, and to just be more in tune with what's happening through the shapes, through the asanas. So as we go through these today, I encourage you to grab your blocks or your block alternative substitutes and try some of these shapes along with me. So we'll start with the blocks toward the top of your mat. If you have 2, one on either side, if you're just using one block, you can bring it toward the center or take it off to the side. I'm gonna walk through some poses, kind of have a chance to flow. We'll try to keep things even right and left, but I won't promise that'll be perfect. But I'll really stop and explain how to use the blocks. So know that this may not feel as in the flow as our regular Vinyasa classes, but hopefully you'll find some new and different ways to use the blocks and understand how and when to incorporate them. So from a child's pose, knees can be wide or together. I like the blocks in the lowest setting, and I place my hands on the blocks, so feel free to scoot them as far forward as feels good. Head down to the ground. And just let yourself settle in here. And what this is doing is creating a little bit more sensation, a little bit more of a stretch through your shoulders, your upper back, your underarms, maybe even your chest. So if this feels okay, stay. If it's too much, drop your hands down to your mat. If you have one block, you can bring it to the center of your mat and bring your hands closer together. Both hands on the block. Breathe here and notice if you'd like a little bit more sensation. If that's the case, bring your blocks a little closer. Bend your elbows, place your elbows and triceps on the blocks or on one block, if you can reach that. Hands together overhead. And just find a little bit more of a tricep and shoulder stretch. Deep, full breaths. As you're ready, slowly release toward a tabletop. So find your way to hands and knees using hands on blocks. If you have one, just hands to the ground. You can certainly do this without blocks. One of the shapes that I like to take with hands on blocks, because for some reason it just clicks a little bit more in my brain, makes a little bit more sense, is a kind of scapular cow and cat, or retraction and protraction. So as you inhale, imagine kind of sinking your heart between your blocks, like you're squeezing your shoulder blades together in the middle of your back. And then as you exhale, press into the blocks, puff up that space between your shoulder blades. Inhale, let your heart sink. I kind of take a little bend in my elbows here, almost like I'm working toward chaturanga, squeezing shoulder blades together. Exhale, round. And maybe continue to play with this. My brain, it just makes more sense to have the blocks and imagine my heart moving between the blocks. But obviously, as you can see, it's nowhere close. So you can certainly do this without any blocks. Now we'll ditch the left block, or whatever you prefer, place that hand on your mats. Another way I've seen blocks used really creatively is folks who have wrist issues, and instead of placing both hands on blocks, they place one on the ground and then the other forearm on the block. And you might have to play around with the height of the block depending on the length of that person's arms or of your arms. But this allows you to do shapes from tabletop, maybe one arm, one leg back, the opposite arm forward, without placing weights on the hand. So say I had something going on with my right wrist, I'm still able to take maybe cow and cat, bird dog like we just did, some other shapes without placing weight on the wrists. And you could certainly do this with both forearms down. We often teach these shapes with both forearms on the mat, but having your forearms on blocks, especially nice sturdy blocks like these, allows you to find more of a tabletop shape rather than your chest being so low. So you might feel a little bit more successful or feel a little bit more in tune with the rest of class. Feel free to play around with that, and then as you're ready, we'll take downward facing dog with hands on both blocks. And I should also say that my mat right now is kind of a fabricy material, and so with these cork blocks, it feels pretty steady and sturdy and not like it's gonna slip. Depending on the material of your block and of your mat, you want to find for some of these shapes that you're not slipping and sliding with your blocks. That could do the opposite effect. As we take downward facing dog with your hands on your blocks, just notice how it feels maybe different for you. As I say that, my block is slipping. So for me, I feel this a little bit more in my legs. I have never felt like downward facing dog is a resting shape, as some people say, but this comes a little bit closer to a resting shape. There's less weight on my hands, my wrists, my upper body, and more weight kind of resting back into my legs. Take your feet together, reach your right leg to the sky, breathe in, and then as you exhale, step your right foot forward between your hands. And hopefully you notice that you've got a little bit more space there to step forward. You can always bring your blocks higher to the middle setting or the highest setting to feel even more space. This is a fantastic option for your students who are pregnant, your students who aren't quite as flexible as stepping forward or just don't feel as comfortable doing that. Having the blocks really allows that extra space to step forward. Bring your left foot forward to meet your right. And leave one of your blocks, doesn't matter which. Let's take a halfway lift, holding onto one block. Exhale, folds. Take that block with you, rise all the way up to standing. Bring your block into your left hand, and then stretch up and over to your left as you exhale. Feel the extra weight pulling you down, creating more of a stretch, more sensation. Inhale through center, and then switch hands, block into your right, exhale to the other side. Inhale, come back to center. Keep the block between your hands. Exhale, bend your elbows, bring the block behind your head. Imagine you can lean your head into the block, even if it's nowhere close, a little bit of a back bend. Stay strong through your core. And then slowly bring it back to center. Take it down to the ground. We're gonna take our folds, and then find your second block on the highest setting. Lift halfway, breathe in, and exhale, fold. Bring your blocks kind of, I would say below your shoulders, just in front of your toes. We're gonna step back to plank with our hands just behind the blocks. And we'll use the blocks for chaturanga. I'm gonna drop my knees. So I'm not talking through a chaturanga with knees lifted. You're welcome to drop your knees or keep them lifted. What we're gonna try to do is bring our shoulders to the tops of the blocks. So there's a reason they're on the highest setting. I don't wanna go too much further, and the goal is to have a right angle or a 90-degree bend in my elbows. So a little shift forward, breathe in, and then lower to the blocks. This helps us build strength, find the right distance to drop. I can come into a plank here and I can hold it much longer than I would hold my chaturanga without. Obviously, I'm leaning a little bit on the blocks. I can kind of hover and feel them. But that gives us the feedback mechanism to find the right alignment, to build strength, and to slowly get there on our own. So a great way to use your blocks for chaturanga as well. And then you can move them out of the way, find your downward facing dog without. And just notice how that feels, maybe a little different than the last time you were here. Feet together to touch. Let's find the blocks. So I'm gonna bring mine to my second setting now, just to do that step through with the other leg. Left leg high, breathe in, and step forward, breathe out. Look forward, inhale. Exhale, right foot meets your left. You can keep the blocks, stitch them, maybe hands to 2 blocks for your halfway lift, breathe in. Exhale, folds. Leave the blocks on the ground. Inhale, rise, arms to the sky. Exhale, palms together in front of your heart. We're gonna grab one block and then take your chair pose with your feet a little bit wider. So I'm gonna bring mine about hip distance apart. Place the block right above your knees between your thighs and sit low. This is a nice way to incorporate a block because it helps you squeeze your inner thighs together. You really have to hold on with your adductor muscles, your pelvic floor, your core muscles to keep the block from sliding down. And it creates that sensation of hugging in that we're looking for. Obviously, my feet are a little bit wider than they might be without. So find what works. This is also a really beautiful option for our pregnant students, our students who are looking for a little bit more stability in chair pose. And it provides that stability with feet wide without feet knocking in. So you've got the block to kind of keep the right alignment, knees in line with toes. Big inhale. Exhale, forward fold. We're gonna keep the block here. A little bit weird. Inhale, lift halfway. You're gonna exhale, little steps back. If you can hop, you can hop it. And we're gonna try to take chaturanga, squeezing the block between our thighs, keeping that inner thigh engagement. Breathe in, shift forward. Breathe out halfway. Inhale, maybe you're up dog. Exhale to downward facing dog. Feel free to grab the block and move it out. Take a moment in your down dog, your child's pose. Know and realize, obviously you've probably seen with me, that it's not always the smoothest transitions unless everyone's using a block. There might be a little bit of, try this, do this, slide the block in, move the block out, and that's okay. We're just trying to create awareness of how we can use the blocks. You certainly don't have to use them for all the shapes all the time. We'll come back to 3-legged dog with or without the blocks. You decide. Right leg high, breathe in. Step your right foot forward. I'm using blocks in the second setting. You can use lowest, middle, tallest, none. Sink your hips as you breathe in, look forward. Lift your hips as you breathe out. And I call this a modified pyramid. Some people call this a cow lunge. We'll take that twice more. Inhale, sink your hips. Exhale, lift your hips. And this allows for a little bit more space. I can really keep my hips in line versus forcing my hands to the ground, especially when I'm not feeling quite as open. Re-bend into your right knee, left hand to your block. So you choose the height, right arm to the sky. Find that twist. My tendency here is to drop this left hip down. Having the block there lifts me up a little bit, lets me kind of square off my hips, even things out, and really find the twist through my upper back versus my low back, my pelvis. One more breath in. And then breathe it out. Right hand down. We're gonna take this to warrior 2. So I'm just gonna slide this block out of the way so that it's not blocking the alignments. And there's certainly ways to use the blocks here as well. We won't just yet, we'll get there. Breathe in. And then as you exhale, reach forward, find your side angle. So I'm gonna take my block on my highest setting. It can either come inside my foot, outside my foot as I'm gonna take it. You can choose to not use it, rest your forearm. This allows me to feel a little bit more space. I'm trying not to collapse on the block, still create that sense of lift. But I don't have my forearm on my thighs, I often do. I don't have to reach for the ground and dump into my spine. I've got that nice long length and space. And then when you're ready, release. We'll just come right back to downward facing dog for the second side. So I'm gonna use my hands on blocks. You're welcome to or not. Take a flow or simply step it back. Left leg high, breathe in. Step your foot forward between your hands, breathe out. Cow and cat lunge or low lunge into your modified pyramid. Breathe in to sink your hips, look forward. Breathe out to lift your hips, relax your head and neck. And just find that a couple more times. Rebend into your left knee, right hand to your block, left arm to the sky to find your twist. And as you're using props, blocks especially, or today, just notice how it feels different than it does without. Where you can find more sensation, more awareness. What feels like it's working better. Or for you that day, release it down. We'll find warrior two, back heel pivots flat, so a moment just to settle in. Breathe in, reach forward, and then exhale to your side angle. I'm using the block outside my foot. Again, you can use it inside if you prefer, whatever setting you like. I feel a lot on my right side because instead of just getting into the shape and staying there, I can really focus on lengthening, pressing through my feet, breathing space where my body needs it. And that feels like enough. Release. Take a moment in your down dog, in your child's pose. Make any adjustments. We're gonna add on a little bit to that flow, taking it to another shape and using the block within the flow, which is also a really fun way to incorporate using props for a whole class. So back to your downward facing dog with or without your blocks. Right leg high, breathe in. Exhale, step your right foot forward between your hands. This time you're gonna rise to a crescent lunge, take a block with you, and then bend your elbows. So that block is between your hands like we did standing, a little lean back. Inhale, block to the sky. Exhale, warrior two, blocking your right hand. This one is great with a heavy block like cork because it adds some weight, but you can certainly do it with foam. Inhale, reach, block to your left hand, exhale back to warrior two. Once more like that, breathe in, switch hands. A little tricky if you're like me and you get confused easily. Keep your block in your right hand, reverse warrior, reach it up and back. And then this time to a half moon. So you're gonna launch yourself a little bit forward. The block is already there, so you can place it in the exact right spot. Stack your hip, open up your shoulder. It's more grounding to look down. You can certainly look sideways or up if you want to challenge that a little bit more. Deep, full breaths. We're gonna slowly release left hand down toward a standing splits or what might be more like a supported warrior three. So you can choose to have your leg more level, your chest more level, or dive a little bit more forward towards standing splits. And this is a beautiful way to teach a warrior three because you've got the support and then you can play with balance. Or to offer standing splits because you've got the hands there, you don't have to bend your right knee quite as much to feel sensation. And that feels like enough. Release, left foot meets your right, forward fold. Lift halfway, breathe in. And fold, breathe out. Heel toe your feet out wide. We'll take this to a malasana squat using a block or two to sit on. So I like them long ways on the lowest setting. And then I just sit my bottom down. This allows me to really lengthen my spine. Rather than rounding forward, I can focus on the lift. My elbows don't quite fit between my legs if I'm using two. But here if I have one, I can add that extra sensation or pressure just for a little bit different feel in the shape. One more deep breath in. And exhale, fold. Keep your feet wide. Grab both of your blocks. Bring them to the highest or the second setting. And then just walk your blocks as far as you can to your right. Let your head and your neck relax. You might bend one or both knees. Walk your blocks over to the other side. And then return to center. Again, find your way to your downward facing dog. Through a flow, your vinyasa or not. Take a break if you like it. Reset what you need to. And we'll find that on the other side. Feet together this time, left leg high, breathe in. Step your foot forward between your hands, breathe it out. Grab one of your blocks, inhale to crescent lunge, block between your hands. Exhale, bend your elbow, maybe look up. Inhale, block high, block in your left hand, exhale, open to your warrior two. Inhale, straighten your left leg, switch the hand for your block into your right, back to warrior two, exhale. And again, inhale, reach. And exhale to warrior two. Breathe in, stretch it up and back. And breathe out, launch into your half moon. Let the weight of that block bring you toward the ground. It's right in front of your foot, maybe about 12 inches, 18, depending on the length of your body. Find that space. I love using a block for half moon. It feels more stable. It also allows me to really lengthen the underside of my torso, so the side closest to the ground. Otherwise, I kind of collapse. Most of our legs are longer than the length of our arms. And so it helps to have that extra space. Whew, maybe you fall too. As you're ready, into your standing splits or your supported warrior three with your blocks. Perhaps you find both and just notice how they feel. And then release to a forward folds. You can move your blocks to the side, lift halfway, breathe in. Exhale, folds. Tuck and curl into a little ball, lift your heels, drop your bottom, round your forehead to your knees, and breathe. And then find your way back to downward facing dog. We'll take a couple more shapes on either side before we come to some standing balancing poses. Feet together, big toes touch, right leg high, breathe in. Step your foot forward between your hands. We're gonna set up for triangle pose. So I like to start in a warrior two, and I'm gonna place my block where I want it. For me, that's just behind my heel, or kind of in line with my heel, inside my foot. You may prefer outside. And then rise to your warrior two. Straighten out your front leg. Feel free to shorten your stance. Take a breath in, reach forward, and then exhale down. And here then you've got the block handy. You can move it into the space that you want. Open up your left arm. Very similar to half moon, and a lot of folks like to move from triangle to half moon. The block's already there. You can scoot it forward and find it. Because I'm less focused on kind of holding myself up, you'll hear a lot of teachers say don't dump into that bottom hand. When you've got the block, for me it feels kind of nice to find more groundedness, maybe more sensation along the top hip. If you're collapsing into your shoulder or want a little bit more strength, you can lift off the block slightly, but use the support and notice how that changes the shape. And then we're gonna rise up. You can scoot the block to the middle, take it with you. Turn your toes to the long edge of your mat, lift your heart, breathe in, and then fold forward to your prasarita. Another option for forward folds is to use a block to rest your head on. So if you're not quite as flexible as I am, you might need a couple of blocks. And this allows you to feel, again, that sense of support that lets you release a little bit deeper into a shape. Sometimes, if I've got the space, I may or may not today, maybe, not quite, I like to rest my shoulders on the blocks. So for your students who are extra flexible and their head comes close to the ground, maybe they take their feet wider, rest their shoulders, and can kind of feel their neck lengthen a little bit more, a sense of release there. As you feel ready, lift back up. We're gonna turn toward the top of our mat once again with your blocks. Always a little awkward transition. Bend your front knee, drop your back knee. We'll move into a lizard shape, so right foot out to the side. I like both hands on both blocks inside my foot, and you can choose the height or this setting. Maybe your forearms come down, your hands come down. For some reason, forearms down, I'm just able to clear my neck, my trapezius a little bit more. That feels more supportive. I am not one of them, but I will try to demonstrate. For your ultra flexible students who want more sensation, you can place the block on the lowest setting and have them place their foot on top of the block. And this will just deepen that lizard stretch. So those are those students who are like, I don't need a block, I'm there. Okay, well you can find something different. Find a different feeling, a different shape, a different sensation. You can stay here as long as you like. We'll move next into a half splits. Recenter your right foot. I'm gonna place my blocks in the highest setting. Lift up a little, right toes forward, and then shift your weight back. Always choose the height that makes sense. Give yourself a lean forward. Maybe it's forearms down. Maybe you come all the way down. If you want to move this into a full split, two options I really love is hands on blocks to keep my shoulders stacked over my hips. So I've got my hands on either side of my leg. Or I place the block usually on the middle setting, I would say, and let my front thigh rest in the block. And then I really work on finding that length and that lift. A little support there, not just hanging out in space, not forcing a stretch that's not happening. And then as you've had enough, find your way out. We'll come back to downward facing dog. So whatever other movements you need in between, some wiggles, some shakes, resets, take those. And then second side, left leg high. Step your foot forward between your hands. Get yourself set up for your triangle pose, starting with your warrior two. So it can be helpful to set up the blocks when you're close to the ground versus having to drop back down. And that's why I like to do it from there. Even if it's not perfect, it feels a little bit less awkward than here, having to grab the block. If you're a teacher teaching a class, that's where you can really help your students get yourself into your triangle shape, and then you can give them the block. But if you're practicing on your own, it's helpful to have those little tips and tricks to set up before so that you can feel it right away without having to adjust, having to do too much negotiation with the stuff around. Let's do one more breath in your triangle. And then rise back up. Grab your block, place it to the center of your legs. Even out or parallel your feet. Sit up tall, stand up tall, breathe in. Exhale, hinge forward for Prasarita. Maybe again you use a block to rest your head. This might provide a little bit more support for a shape, like hands behind your back interlaced or hands to your ankles. You've got your head supported, you don't feel like you're gonna fall. And you can work on depth through your legs and through your spine. Stay here as long as you like. When you're ready, make your way back toward the top of your space. Bend your left knee, set yourself up for your lizard pose. Shimmy your foot out, blocks inside. And I just think of the blocks as an extension of my arm. So I literally, when I move my arm, I move my block, and I get myself set up. And this was a place where if you wanted a block below your foot for more sensation, could be nice. I will always encourage that balance between strength and flexibility. We don't want to be too strong where we're so tight and we can't move. We also don't want to be so flexible that we don't have integrity in our joints or support. And a lot of us think that in yoga we're looking for the deepest, the biggest stretch, and that's certainly not true. Maybe 2 more breaths here. then as you're ready, half splits, recenter your foot, shift your toes a little forward, and then your weight back. Find the height of the block that allows you to create sensation or depth, both, maybe integrity in your alignment. Maybe you work into that full split Hanumanasana, like the block on the highest setting below my upper thigh. And that seems to be, or the middle setting I should say, seems to be the best place for me right now where I am in my splits, and you might feel differently. And when that feels like enough, release. Find your way to a child's pose, a down dog, a seat, somewhere that you can rest comfortably, and just take a moment to check in before we move into some balancing shapes. So we already did our supported warrior 3 and standing splits. I like to use blocks for balancing to kind of challenge the balance. And I'm using these cork blocks. If you have foam blocks, this will be extra challenging and will really help to engage the muscles in your feet that help you balance, your core muscles, all the stability muscles through your legs, around your spine. So this can be a fun way to play with it. So we'll start with the tree pose. You're just going to use one block on the lowest setting. And you're going to stand on the block. And then you'll find the other foot in tree. And maybe you keep your toes on the ground. Maybe you come to ankle, maybe you come to thigh. And you can play here. Another great option is to keep that grounded foot on the ground and bring the other foot to the block. And this is great for our students who are just working with balance. They've got the external rotation. They've got a little bit of a lift of the legs, the same shape with the lifted side, but they've got the support of the block to find that feeling in the balance. And then you can release and try the other side. So tree pose, right and left, whether you're standing on the block or using the block for your lifted leg. Give it a little play. It's okay if you fall out. Remember, your gaze is so important. So as you're teaching these, if you're a teacher, it can be really challenging to remind your students with extra props not to look at the prop or not to pay attention to what you're doing, but to focus steady eyes on one point, that drishti. And as things feel even, release and shake it out. Another one I really like this for is for our eagle pose. So I'm going to start in a regular eagle. I usually start by teaching chair. I take arms first. We'll do right under left and then legs right over left. So a nice option is to have that block in front or slightly to the side, and this is where it may be helpful to set it up first, and just resting toes on blocks. This allows space for the crossing, a little bit of extra support for the balance. Maybe they can reach back here, but they're not taking everything out of alignment. Just sitting in. You could certainly practice this eagle pose standing on the block as well, a little extra challenge. But because this one already feels twisty and balancing, I think some support is a really nice option. And then release, shake it out, second side. So I'm going to bring the block over, plant my right foot, sit into my chair, left arm below, left leg above, and my block is right there next to my right foot for the support. And as things feel even, shake it out, wiggle around. You could certainly do additional balancing poses like we did tree, standing on the block, say for dancers. That one can be a lot already, so we're not going to do that today. Adding the block will just add another element of fun, of challenge, or potentially of stability and support. So we're going to come down to a seated position, however you want to get there. You can bring your blocks with you. And we'll take a hero's pose. I'm going to use 2 blocks, and I'm placing them on the lowest setting. stacked on top of each other between my feet, long ways. So my butt is a little bit wider than it is forward and back. And this allows me to get the tops of my feet down and my knees together for a hero's pose. It also enables a tall spine and some space here for the front of my hips, my hip flexors, where a lot of us are really tight. So if seated postures don't feel good, or you think you're always rounding forward, adding that bit of support from a block or two can be super helpful, especially if you're starting a class or a practice in this shape when you're not super warmed up. 2 feels like a lot, so I'm gonna move it out and just sit on 1. And I get a little bit more sensation, a little bit support here. Like I said, this is great for all seated poses, an easy seat with your legs crossed, a lotus, a half lotus, even moving into things like head to knee or a seated forward fold. Having your hips a little bit elevated can be a really nice place to provide that extra support and stability. Let's take this into a pigeon pose next. So you'll want at least 1 block handy, and I will use 2. So I'm gonna have 1, I'm gonna start with both near the top of my mat. I'll take left shin forward first so you can see, you can start with whatever leg. And so see how lifted my hip is? I slide this block just below that lifted or front glute and thigh, and allow myself to sit on it. Just a little support here. Back leg is long. And then I like the second block to bring my forearms or my hands to. I said this before, I'll say it again. That just feels better for my shoulders, my neck, so things aren't creeping up. I can really allow some space if I drop my forearms versus my hands, or completely relax to the ground. And if you're noticing using blocks, you kind of lose sensation, maybe you've, through your breath, gotten a little deeper, you can of course slide it out, but that provides the support to start. A block under forehead might be nice if you're gonna hold here for a long time. Say you're doing a pigeon or swan, sleeping swan in a yin practice. Having a little extra support with a block really allows you to relax into connective tissue. Stay here, or for a different variation, if you've got the block underneath your left hip, remove it. Swing your right leg out in front, and we'll take a double pigeon or fire log. So I'm gonna bring my front shin parallel to the top of my mat, stack my right shin on top. I've got a lot of space here. There's a lot of stuff going on. A couple options is I can bring a block between my bottom foot and top knee, and that provides a little support. Or you can bring one in front of your bottom shin and kind of scoot yourself forward, place your top shin on it. Because I have these cork ones, they're not as soft, it feels better today for me to stack it between my knee and ankle. And then I've got the support there that allows me to relax and move a little deeper versus kind of hanging out in space, not supporting my joints, my body. As that feels like enough, you're gonna switch. Windshield wiper, we'll start with the pigeon again, this time right leg forward or whatever side you didn't do. Get all your props. A little maneuvering always, and that's okay. Doesn't always have to be a fluid transition. It's not all about how it looks, more about how it feels and how we can get into the shape with support. And there are obviously tons more ways to use the blocks. We've got a few more shapes that I want to share next. Left, but get really creative. See how you can incorporate these. See where your practice feels like maybe it's missing something or could use a little bit of something different. Support, extension, alignment. If you got the block underneath your right hip, slide it out of the way. We'll come into that double pigeon fire log shape. Left shin stacked on top of right shin. A block between, and it's not completely supporting my knee, but it's supporting my leg, my thigh, and that allows for me to feel like I can go a little bit deeper, a little bit of a lean forward, and I really feel it. Maybe 1 or 2 more breaths. As it feels like the right time, release. Windshield wiper your knees, shake out your legs, extend them both in front of you. We'll just do 1 seated forward fold. You're welcome to do 1 knee bent if you'd rather do like a head to knee, Janu Shirshasana. But a nice way to use blocks here is a lot of people think they have to reach their toes, which is certainly not true. And a lot of people kind of overly round their spine, which is one option. But if you want to keep your back really long and feel the sensation there with more of a flat back, using blocks is a great way to do that. Sit up tall and then start to just walk the blocks forward. I like elbows bent. I always like forearms down. The millionth time I've said that, that just feels supportive to me. Another beautiful option is to place the block between your legs, maybe 1 or 2. And then if you do have the space, you might have to adjust where they are. Rest your forehead on the block. For those of us who want more sensation, can get really deep, you can place the block underneath your feet or behind your feet and reach toward the block. Notice how the support feels, where you feel maybe a different sensation using a block or 2, and what you like and don't like, personal preferences. And gently release. Bring the blocks to the sides of your mat. And I always say this in a class that I'm teaching because it sucks to lay all the way down and then have to grab your blocks. So have them handy, come all the way down onto your back. And then feet on the ground, knees to the sky for a bridge pose. Lift your hips, slide the block underneath your sacrum. You want to think more crack than back. So that little bone between your hips is great, really on your butt or upper butt area, not on your low back. And you can absolutely stay here. And this feels really nice for me to support my low back. Another beautiful option is to extend your legs. I feel a little bit more hip flexors or front of thigh stretches. And or, so lots of choices here, a waterfall legs to the sky, which is a variation of, I need to adjust just slightly, a variation of a shoulder stand. So same benefits, just a gentler, more supportive version that really allows and accounts for the health and safety of your neck. So choose one of those, try them all on. Give yourself a few breaths to really feel them. And then as you feel ready, release your feet down, lift your hips, slide the blocks out from underneath your hips, lower down. Whatever rebound shapes, counter movements you like, knees to chest. We'll end with Shavasana with your blocks. Actually, one more before Shavasana. Just kidding. Supported fish. This is a beautiful one. I don't want to miss it. Tons of options. My very favorite is to do a block on the second setting, so kind of the second height, along the length of my spine. And the goal for me is to take my shoulder blades on either side. So I'm placing this kind of where my bra strap starts, at the base of my shoulder blades to my upper back. I take my second block and I place it on the highest setting, a little bit away to place the base of my skull there. I take my forearms down and then I can grab the block with my hands and place it in the right spot. I lay back and then the other block below my head and I can really stretch out. This is awesome for opening your chest, for releasing. It may feel very vulnerable, beautiful heart shape. Another option, what a lot of my students prefer, is to take the block again on the second setting or the lowest setting, depending on your openness, but take it the opposite direction, so more perpendicular to your spine. And then for this one, we're looking for shoulder blades just on top of the block. So block, again, around bra strap area. I do the same thing. I come onto my forearms and then I can kind of wiggle with my hands to block into place. I like the second block highest. Some people might prefer it on the same setting or a lower setting to open up a little bit more through your throat and your chest. And now, when that feels like enough, and you can absolutely stay here for your final rest, we're gonna come to our backs with the blocks below your thighs. And I like this above the knees, kind of the meaty part of your thighs, for a nice low back release. And you might have to adjust. Just let everything relax and release into the ground, into the blocks. Notice what it felt like to practice and to try out maybe something new with a little bit more support. I liken the use of props to having a support network of friends, of community, and how much more successful and better we feel when we've got people cheering us on, there for us, helping us. Think of the props in the same way. And of course, you can stay here as long as you like. Continue to breathe, meditate, feel. Or if you're ready to move on, start with some little movements, perhaps a big stretch. And then find your way up to a seated position. I'm going to sit cross-legged on my block. A little extra support here. Just a moment to pause and notice how you're feeling, what happened, and maybe what's changed through your practice. As you're ready, palms together in front of your heart. Bow your head in silence to close your practice, to thank yourself and to honor those who have come before us and who will come after us. Truly honoring this lineage of our yoga practice. Thank you so much. I'll be sharing some more videos using a strap, using bolsters and blankets, as well as the wall and chairs to incorporate different props into your practice. And if you're interested in going deeper, I offer an online 200-hour yoga teacher training, and I encourage you to check that out at floatingyogaschool.com.